Awishkoneha, Joe and Teresa, thank you. And Meiha Nehinkam, hello relatives. So good to be with all of you. So in honor of my tribal relatives, past and present, the original caretakers of Tawangad, I want to acknowledge their contributions in protecting the lands, waters, and our ant and plant and animal relatives across our unceded territory. Yadar Komokre Hanuk Vatam, we remember the ancestors. Aweshkondreha Ahihirom Kohyanayanar, we thank our elders and our teachers. Karukenakre Egotarhem, we stand with our children, both the present and the 7 generations to come. And let us all remember to walk gently upon our Earth Mother and give her the respect that she deserves. So let's have a good talk. Fabian, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you, Tina. A little bit about these land discussions. There was a post that we posted on Instagram about people using their stimulus checks to buy land and to grow food for their families. And in theory, that sounds great. But we thought it was important for folks to, I guess, learn how we can not reproduce like colonial paradigms, not reproduce like the systems that have erased and ostracized and disenfranchised Black and Brown communities, Indigenous communities. And also, it's hard to work with folks, you know, in general, because we've been taught a lot of like super individualistic, competitive ways of being, you know, ways of organizing. You know, we've been a part of groups where it was a lot of like a hierarchical structure that caused us to kind of disband. And I'm sure many people here who are actively trying to help their communities might have come across some similar issues. So we thought, you know, hey, let's have discussions and let's share some knowledge from our own experiences. And even just with that, you know, having these discussions and learning how to share versus like typically in school systems where you have like one person talking and, you know, it's not really like productive, I guess. But with that said, I wanted to share a little bit of theory. Me and Teresa are kind of like philosophy, I don't know what you call it. Like we like critical thinking. We like being able to understand things from new perspectives. So let me try to pull this up right now. Let's see. Oh, here we go. View published site. So let me share it. Here we go. All right, here's our makeshift Google site. I went to Cal Poly Pomona, so I definitely have a story to share with my connection to Pomona. And as Fabian will soon like detail his works at Tony Serta Park. When I was growing up, my dad used to take me a lot to the powwow ceremonies over there. And so growing up, you know, that was at least my connection with Pomona. But going to Cal Poly Pomona, I learned this idea of peoplehood. And so when we talk about communities and we talk about, you know, who we are as a people, I think it's often spoken about in like a metaphor. Like for me, I like learning like at least the technicalities of things. So the peoplehood matrix is actually came out of American Indigenous studies, which, you know, I have my criticisms about that idea of American Indigenous, like why is it called that? But with that said, the idea of the peoplehood matrix was not to umbrella-size, if that's a word, or generalize what quote unquote Native American culture is, right? Everyone thinks, or at least it's taught in mainstream colonial education, like Native Americans, quote unquote, they all bang a drum, all wear headdresses, and all of this. But from what we've learned, or at least what I've learned, is that there was over 500 plus different tribes who have distinct languages, distinct histories, distinct ceremonies within just what we call United States. So when we want to talk about the, I guess, when we want to talk about decolonizing our understanding, I feel like this theory helped a lot with putting into perspective. So the idea of people means that every people has this idea of connection to the land, as it's placed right here. It's called place territory. Every people has a connection to language, a connection to history, and a connection to ceremony. So when we're taught that Christopher Columbus came and he stole the land from the natives, you know, if the land is connected to language, he's stealing that relationship. He's destroying that relationship. Colonizers were destroying the places of history. They were destroying the ceremonies, right? And as we might have learned about the California mission system, we can see that in practice, how that looks like, and the horrors that it continues to cause, and how that legacy carries on. So, you know, put it into contemporary times, when we talk about gentrification, it's not just some building in a low-income community. That's a place where, you know, people in that community who grew up there for a few generations, they have a connection to that community. They have a connection to some ceremony to that community. Like if the Dodger Stadium, right, which I know as an example, the Dodger Stadium it came about because of eminent domain, and a lot of, even we have friends whose family were removed forcibly by this government, who were staying there during it was called Chavez Ravine. So, but if something were to happen to Dodger Stadium, a lot of Dodger fans, a lot of people who call themselves like Dodger fans, they would lose their place of ceremony if something were to happen to the Dodger Stadium. They would lose their place of history, their place of, you know, coming together and all that. So, with that, we feel a lot of our work is, even though people kind of attribute us to like the native plants and us kind of like just turning green spaces back into native plant ecosystems, we're trying to, as best as we can, keep this more holistic framework of what does it mean to do community work, so that we're not reproducing things like erasing indigenous history, or at least being more respectful and being good guests and good ancestors while we're here. So with that said, and if anyone has any questions, like, feel free to go in the chat box. With that said, I would like to introduce Fabian, who has been very inspirational about the work he does, and especially in Pomona and all that. So Fabian, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and I guess just take it away, but anyone feel free to jump into the chat box. And if you have any questions, you know, we're not very formal about this, so just feel free to jump in.
Whoops. I meant to hit unmute, not stop my video. What's up, everybody? Thank you all so much. Thank you, Joe and Teresa, for having me. I really appreciate all the work that you all do, and for, you know, acknowledging the work that I do, and collaborating with each other. Thank you so much, Tina, for your presence. It's always a pleasure to share space with you. Thank you so much for opening up this meeting for us. And thank you all for joining us on your Friday night. Y'all can be doing whatever you want. I hope y'all are just staying at home though and chilling, because, you know, it's crazy out there. But, you know, again, thank you all so much. Just a little bit about myself. You know, I grew up in the city of Pomona, also, you know, or, you know, Toibigna, but, you know, known as Pomona now. And so, you know, I grew up here all my life. I definitely want to talk a little bit about, you know, the work that I've been doing, but like, I feel like the work that I'm doing right now is connected to my experience growing up here in Pomona, and just who I am, and how I grew up and everything. You know, like I never saw myself as somebody who would be doing work in the parks as a parks commissioner here in the city of Pomona. You know, I never saw myself doing anything like that, right? But, you know, just growing up here in Pomona, you know, like a lot of other people, you know, I didn't leave Pomona for you know, a majority of my life, right? Like for me, Pomona was my life. For me, Pomona was, you know, everything. It was the best place to be, and a lot of that had to do with, you know, me not knowing, not being exposed to other cities and how other people live in different cities, and you know, when I finally had the opportunity to go to college and go to UC Santa Barbara out there, I was like, wow, like people live way different, than people here in Pomona, right? Like when I had the privilege of going to college out there and living out there, right? Like I had an apartment that was 5 minutes walking distance from the beach, right? And so like I was out there for a while and I got used to the lifestyle over there in Santa Barbara. And then for spring break, I came back home and I was like, something feels weird in my heart. Like in Santa Barbara, like I said, I'll walk 5 minutes and I'll get to the beach in one direction. In another direction, I'll get to a green space. In another direction, I'll get to a park, right? And here in Pomona, I walk 5 minutes and I'll get to an empty lot. I'll get to I'll get to a rundown building, right? I'll get to some train tracks, right? And I don't get the same fresh air as I did over there in Santa Barbara, right? So that really woke me up, and you know that really hurt because that's when I realized, what, Pomona ain't, we don't have anything in Pomona, right? It's hard for us to get around. It's hard for us to have access to food, to have fresh food, healthy food. It's hard for us to have access to clean air. Like Pomona is one of the most polluted cities in California. It has a really high pollution rate, and Pomona is predominantly people of color, right? And so that, a lot of that stuff broke my heart, but trying to circle back to how I got into being a parks commissioner and all of that. I really like I said, I got to live a different lifestyle in Pomona, and when I came back, I would see people that I grew up with, went to school with, no shoes, no shirt, strung out on drugs, asking for change at a McDonald's drive-through, right? And that, I was like, oh man, that broke my heart, right? When I finally came back, when I graduated, and I came back to Pomona. My homies that I grew up with, I saw them. I still saw them around, right? I became a parks commissioner. I went to go survey all of the parks, went to go check them out. I had the opportunity to represent the parks in the area where I grew up in my whole life, parks that I actually visited as a kid, right? Where I hung out. And when I went to go survey those parks, I saw some of my friends that I grew up with from middle school to high school, strung out, homeless, living in those very parks that I represent to today, right? And that, man, like that really made me check my privilege right there, right? As someone who had the opportunity to go to college. And so, I don't know what it was, but the council member, Victor Preciado, like I don't know what it was, like he was like, hey, be my parks commissioner. He won his election. He was like, be my parks commissioner. And like I said, I didn't know why. Like I didn't know nothing about parks, right? I don't know anything about the land or anything like that, right? But I did it, I was like, all right, I'm down, like I'm down for Pomona. I'm down for my city, all day, 100%, and so like I said, I started surveying the parks, right? And then there's Tony Serta Park, right? So Tony Serta Park, that was a park that, I was a part of a generation where you were told not to go to that park. You were told a lot of bad stuff happens there, right? I still remember being a little kid, walking past there, and there was caution tape on the picnic tables, right? A woman got raped and killed there, right? I remember that. I remember the ladies talking about that. I remember my mom talking about that, right? And I remember seeing that caution tape and all of that, right? So like that's the area I grew up in, right? So that, like, I didn't go back to that park for the rest of my life, right? Not only that, I got into some stuff growing up, right? Like I started getting into like the whole, like with the crews and gangs and stuff like that, right? Like always fighting and like beefing it with people. And so like I know if I went to that park, like it wouldn't go well for me because of the things I decided to affiliate myself with, right? And so like when I decided to step into that park as an adult, as a college graduate, I was scared. I'm not gonna lie. I was scared because of the stuff that I was involved in back in the days, right? And that's still in the back of my mind every single day, and no matter what I do when I'm out in my city and everything, because I'm not hiding, I'm I'm not like being at my home scared all the time, you know, worried that my past will catch up to me, you know, like I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on like, you know what, I want to improve my city. I want the kids that grew up like I did to have more opportunities than I did, right? I want the kids that, you know, grew up here in this city to have the same opportunities as kids over there in Santa Barbara, right? I'm not gonna run from my problems. I'm gonna face them head on here, and I'm gonna improve my city, right? So that's what I decided to do. That's why I took up that position, right? And I decided to go to Tony Serta Park, and I broke that fear, right? And then like a lot of my homies from back in the days are like, hey bro, like you have some guts for doing all that stuff, right? Like you're out there, you're not, you know, you're calling out the city for not taking care of our parks. You're you know, it doesn't matter to you, you know, like you're not hiding, like you're out there. I'm like, yeah man, like it doesn't, you know, like the community to me comes first, right? And I, you know, I believe a lot in leading by example, right? So like you got to set that example to your team, to your to your group, right? You gotta set the tone for things sometimes, right? And then other people will probably join in, and that's beautiful. It's beautiful when your community joins in on that, right? And because sometimes that's all it takes, because a lot of people in Pomona think that, like, you know what, like nobody cares, so why should I care, right? That's a big mentality in my city, right? And so I want to break that. I'm like, nah, you know what, I care, and I'm gonna show up every day. If you tell me you need some help with something, I'm gonna pull up, I'm gonna be right there, right? Doesn't matter who it is, doesn't matter, you know, anybody that wants to work with me, I'll work with them, you know. And so, you know, with Pomona, talking about, you know, Tony Serta Park, you know, that particular park and that particular neighborhood, it has a long history of, it has a long history of decades of institutional racism, right? Like redlining. That particular neighborhood was one of the first working class Mexican neighborhoods. That particular neighborhood, you know, was that was a segregated neighborhood. That's where brown people were segregated to live, right, in Pomona, right? So people talk, you know, when you talk about segregation, we talk about racism, things like that. When you grow up learning about these things in school, you think that's far removed. You think that's, nah, that was in the South, right? That was somewhere in Alabama and Georgia. Nah, that was here. That was here in Pomona too, right? That was here in LA. That was here in California, right? And a lot of those things still affect us to this day. So if we like I said, so what does it mean for a neighborhood to be redlined? What does it mean that this particular neighborhood where I grew up in, right next to Tony Serta Park, was redlined? What does that mean? It means that that particular neighborhood, this neighborhood in the 20s and in the 30s, when the city was booming, you know, and when people were doing their best to move over here, or when people were getting pushed out from the east, you know, and there's boosters here trying to attract people here, white people, not black and brown people. They're trying to attract white people, right? You know, during those times, we were segregated in this area. We were the last area to get paved roads. We were the last area to get indoor plumbing. And so neighborhoods that are redlined like that, because of the lack of investment from the city, because of the lack of investment from like private entities and you know, like banks and things like that, because of the lack of investment, you know, there's a health, you know, like people have a lot of health problems as well, right? Like neighborhoods that are segregated and redlined, a lot of them had like some of the highest tuberculosis rates, right? And so when you think about it, you know, those, you know, it's kind of like black, you know, black and brown people are relegated to those areas, right? And so another thing, you know, we have like a shitty education system when it comes to educating black and brown people here in Pomona and in general, right? Like with the school to prison pipeline, like a lot of my friends fell victim to that, to the school to prison pipeline, right? Like when I was at UCSB, I was able to really study education in Pomona, and I did a project on the school to prison pipeline, and I just interviewed all of my friends. That was it. Right, that's all I had to do. I just had to hit them up. Some of them were still in jail, and I hit them up. I was like, "Hey, I need your help with this project," you know. And I was like, "Hey, bro, like, what's up? I'm doing something on school to prison pipeline." And then I heard him tell his cellmate, and he was like, "Hey, bro, like, what's up? Like, my homie can interview you, something about pipes in the schools or something like that." And I was like, "Man, But yeah, you know, I try to, you know, explain to him and everything, and it was all good, you know. But so like I said, like, you know, most like black and brown youth, um, we're more likely to see a jail cell than to get a bachelor's degree, right? And so like I saw that growing up, right? Because when I was in high school, a lot of my friends were already in jail, in and out of jail. Some of my friends, they were already strung out on drugs, like they lost their mind, right? And it was really sad to see, right, growing up. And so I know like Mount Sac Community College really helped me out a lot. And so like I was able to really, I was like one of the only ones that went to college and got a degree and everything, right? And so, you know, it's a sad reality, you know, like my experience lines up with that school to prison pipeline literature, right? And not only that, but black and brown students, black and brown youth are um are are more likely to get harsher punishments than white students, than their white counterparts for the same misbehavior, right? So a lot of us are pushed into the prison system here in this particular neighborhood, right? So when you combine the education system with you know, housing and redlining here in the city of Pomona, you know, and like, you know, people here in these neighborhoods, you know, not being able to buy houses in other areas, not being able to get loans in other areas, more affluent areas, and you know, those banks and those cities not investing in this area that was redlined, right? Like you know, this cycle, we don't create the cycle. This cycle of poverty is created, right? So we just keep on following this cycle, and so we're a lot of us are stuck in this cycle, unfortunately, right? And so like I tell people these things, and I tell them like, look, this lack of investment in our community, just because, you know, um segregation is illegal, just because redlining is illegal now, it doesn't mean that, you know, they went back in to really, you know, reverse the effects of those things, of those decades of you know, not investing in our communities as much as they did in other communities, right? And so all I had to do is take people to Tony Stewart Park and show them, right? All I would have to do is tell people like, look at this park. It's predominantly brown. Predominantly, you know, people who are brown live here all around this neighborhood and Tony Stewart Park. I tell them, look around. In the weekends, it's filled with soccer, with the soccer leagues, right? Soccer activities. So you get a bunch of black and brown kids right there playing soccer, right? And what, you know, when you look at the facilities like that they have to use, you know, think about soccer. Think about how hot, you know, California gets. Pomona gets really hot, right? And, you know, think about those days. Think about a kid playing soccer, and there aren't any water fountains to this day at that park, right? If you look at the restrooms resemble, like I said, I studied like Chicano education when I was at UCSB, and so I saw pictures of restroom facilities in segregated Mexican schools, right? We got inferior schoolings, you know, Mexican schools from the 30s. Like I had pictures of those. They look exactly the same as the ones that are at Tony Serta Park today, right? They don't have any restroom stalls, right? What if a pedophile goes in there with our kids, right? Yeah, and so that's one thing right there, right? Like those, like the facilities, the restrooms resemble segregated Mexican schools from the 30s, right? And the park didn't have any picnic tables for since the 90s, right? And so those are just like very few observations there, right? And so also, you know, keeping in mind, you know, that particular park, that area, because there was a lack of investment in redlined areas, the community had to come together and create mutual aid organizations, right? In this area in particular, one of those mutual aid like neighborhoods was like the Sharkies, and so they started off in the 40s and stuff like that, and so they helped each other out. They would band together because the police would come and beat the crap out of Mexican men here in Pomona. Like they would beat the crap out of them because you know, that's, you know, that's police in Pomona, right? And police in general, especially, you know, around the 60s in those times, right? And so so this particular neighborhood, they had to band together and resist that. They had to band together and help each other out, you know, through mutual aid. But eventually, you know, that, you know, this, you know, this neighborhood, the Sharkies, and, you know, they ended up becoming a gang, right? And they ended up, you know, going and shooting up other neighborhoods. And so that was just another, you know, thing about this cycle of poverty, right? But there were folks who came together after they came back from college, after we had a significant group of brown people go to college in the 60s and come back to their community. They were able to look at the institutions more critically and see, you know what, we need to band together, we need to build a park right here, because that Tony Serta Park, it was just an empty lot where kids would go play and everything, right? And then eventually the community got together and they built that park. They fundraised for those restrooms and everything, right? Like everything that park has had, for the most part, the community had to band together and put it together. You know, there's very little investment from the city itself to this day, to this day, right? And so we're still doing a lot of that, right? And you know, kind of circling back to you know, working with you all, right, with Joe and Teresa, you know, we came together, you know, and we created a community space right there at Tony Serta Park, right? We created a community garden, right? Like I would, like what I'm telling you right now, I would tell the people at the park, because like I started open mic nights at the park. I was like, you know what, I have to activate the stage. There's a stage right there. I'm a performer, you know, this is my heaven right here, right? This is what I could do right here. This is how I could start it off right here. And I started hosting open mic nights at the stage at Tony Serta Park. And it was more than an open mic, right? I was like, you know what, we need to have activities for the youth. And so we had art activities for the youth while we were doing open mic nights. And while we were doing open mic, I would drop, like what I'm telling you right now, I would tell that to the community, to the neighbors, to whoever was there, right? And I told them, like, look at our park, right? It's not a coincidence that it's like this. Look at our community. It's not a coincidence that it's like this, right? It's due to years of disinvestment because of racism, right? Institutional racism, right? So what do we got to do? What are we going to do about it? Like, and I told them, let's go to the council meetings. And so we started making noise and everything, right? And so we were able to get the picnic tables back. We were able to get, the picnic tables were big for me. Now it's a place for community. It's a place for families, because I knew somebody that grew up there and that would go to the park like in the 80s and the 90s. And they said that park was never a family park. That park, the gang will hang out right there, right? All the time. And so we're making it into a community park, you know, and those picnic tables really changed a lot of things, right? And we were finally able to put some more programming into that park. You know, we had car shows. We had what's his name? I forgot his name, but he's from the Temptations. Like, he came and he sang his heart out at one of our car shows, you know, and it was beautiful, right? And so, and like me, one day I want to bring a banda. I want to have a tamborazo right there, right? I want to do some zapateada right there, because I know the community would love it right there, you know. And one of my biggest accomplishments that I think is the community garden that we were able to put together. That took community to a whole nother level. I'll tell you that right now, because before we would come together once a month for the open mic, right? I called it spoken palabra, right? But when we decided to put that garden together, it was so beautiful. I'll tell you about the development of it right now, right? So we, you know, I called in, I put a call out to the community, and we all got together at the picnic tables. We had college students, we had elementary school students, we had middle school students, high school students, we had the senoras right there. You know, we had people that, you know, grew up there, the neighbors and all that stuff. So we had a mix of everybody, right? And it was such a beautiful thing to see everybody talking to each other. And what was more interesting is that a lot of people in our neighborhood speak different languages, right? So some people only speak English, you know, some people can't speak English, some people can't speak Spanish, right? But what really connected us was the land, y'all, was growing stuff, right? Because everybody that was there had some type of knowledge about growing things and about planting things, and right, and what goes well with each other, what grows well with each other, all of those things, right? And so that was just such a beautiful thing to see, people connecting, people learning languages from each other, right? And then when you all came through, oh man, we took it to a whole nother level. Like everybody brought plants and everything. And I remember like we were going around with the plants, right? And we were talking about each plant, and we ended up naming the plant in English, Spanish, and then their Tongva name too. So it's like, typically like if you take like a class where you're learning about plants and stuff like that, they talk about their Latin name, right? And they call it, oh, this is the scientific name, right? Man, nah. Miss me with that. We're doing English, we're doing Spanish, and we're doing Tongva language right here, right? And so I mean, I think that was just beautiful to see right there, right? Everybody coming together, learning different languages, teaching each other about the plants, working together in groups, building solidarity with each other, and we were able to create. And this was something like I was just a guide, like I was just like, all right, here, like this is what like what do y'all want to do with this space right here, right? And so the community collectively, they decided, you know what, we want to have one area where we focus on drought tolerant plants and California natives, right? We want to have one area designated to that. We want to have another area where there's plants that can be used for healing, right? Or for teas and things like that. And then we want to try out growing a little bit of food. We'll just grow a little bit right now because we just want to try it out, right? Because some people were for growing food, some people were against it, right? And some people were against it because they were like, you know what, like who's gonna take care of it, But we decided we'll just start off small, and so that's what we did. 3 different areas, and ever since then, man, like I remember, I was running for board of trustee at Mount Sac, right? Like a public office, right? So I could not go water the plants anymore, right? And I would go back, or I would go water them, and I'll notice that somebody watered them already. Like somebody watered the nopales, and I was like, what the heck? Like somebody's watering stuff here, like because it was a struggle to get water there at some point. Like it's not that much of a struggle anymore because we got it locked, but I would notice that somebody was watering them, and then one day I showed up and I had a bunch of rocks that some company donated, and that's when we started outlining like the garden with rocks, right? And then a lady pulls up, like, and she only speaks Spanish and everything, and she was like, oh, I've been watering the plants, I've been watering the nopales right here. And I was like my jaw dropped. I was like, that's you? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, wow. Like I said, no wonder. Like I started noticing somebody was watering the nopales, but like, wow, that's you. And she was like, yeah, like I live down the street. I live in front of a different park, but I come over here because my son, he has autism, and he really likes the feel of this park right here. So I come here every day with my son, and I bring like her son is like, I think her son's older than me, but she has a carriola, right? She has a stroller, and I'm like, does she have a little baby in there? Like, nah, she has gallons of water in there, and she was watering the plants, and she walks, and I'd be running into her all over Pomona, after that, right? And she has those gallons of water. I'm like, dang, like this garden right here, like really, brought the best out of our community, and like now every time I go to that park, almost every time that I go, I see somebody that I know, and I see people right there taking care of the garden, and sometimes I'm right there because I need to get away real quick, right? And like I remember a little girl came up to me, and she was like, oh, can I have a rock, and can I take it home to paint it? And I was like, you do whatever you want. Take that rock, paint it, bring it back, and I'll be very grateful for that. And then I started partnering up with Justice for Youth, and because they wanted to do youth activities, they work with At Promise Youth, and I told them, hey, bring your kids over here, bring your students. They could paint all the rocks right here. And now every time I go back to that garden, I see more rocks painted with positive messages from the youth here in Pomona, right? So like everybody's taking over ownership of that park, and it's just such a beautiful thing to see, right? And the park is actually behind me right now. It's my virtual background, so that's Tony sort of Park right there. And now we got more art. Everybody's is loving it, right? Like we turned that space into our own place, and I just want to see it grow. And so that's just, you know, it's a lot, but it's a little bit of you know what we do and why I do it, and so yeah, it's just a little bit right there.
Thank you for sharing that. And see, like, these stories are just so important because, you know, we're trying to heal, you know, like as hard as it might seem or be perceived, like it's these stories are healing, you know, and then it lets us know, like, what are we passing down to the next generations. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of us can share stories, and in fact, maybe we can even ask folks, you know, or that are in this chat, like, what is your story to Pomona? You know, if anyone's here from Pomona or wherever you're from, like, what is your story? And then if you want to share online, you know, feel free to maybe just put it in the chat box, like, hey, you know, I would like to share. If you don't mind, I would like to share a little bit of like my story, especially that's very in tune with before I met you. I actually had an opportunity to teach at Westmont Elementary, which I was part of a program at Cal Poly Pomona called the Regenerative Fellowship Program. And what regenerative means, I guess, in the like the field you go to school for, like this is like the studies. The idea is to see how we can blend in like social sciences with engineering, and then with more of the biological sciences, right? So it's more of a interdisciplinary kind of field. But regeneration to me is like music. Like, we have songs, like people have songs that get passed down and on and on and on, right? So I grew up, and my dad used to perform with a band called Redbone. So they were known as like one of the first American Indian like rock bands out there. And he wasn't an original member, but he, you know, he'd done shows and tours. But though that music, right, helped a lot of folks who were called like myself, like urban natives, who didn't have that connection to our ancestral, you know, knowledge and stories. So knowing that even through music, we can continue to survive and continue to thrive, that helps a lot because, you know, it gives us life and it gives us meaning, you know, to recognize that, like Teresa can even share too, that with the plants, you know, and everything we've done, like she does some beautiful poetry that helps a lot of people see someone else like sharing something and be like, hey, I didn't know like someone else felt this way. I didn't know that I can still be a part of this healing process. Like with the lands, it teaches us like, hey, like we're literally seeing these plants grow, and we're seeing butterflies come and bees come. And so, you know, when we see disasters like climate change and everything going on right now, we know that healing is possible, right? But anyways, I was a teacher at Westmont. I was part of a program where I got to like substitute teach at Westmont Elementary. And one of the things that Miguel had mentioned was how polluted Pomona is. And at least to my knowledge, what I read on was that Pomona is one of the most polluted areas in Southern California. And it is because of that, so many freeways, right, and a lot of intersections. So Westmont Elementary is just right there between like where the 71 and the 60 and the 10 intersect. So I had all the students come and draw Earth, like draw the planet Earth, Mother Earth on these paper plates. And then they put petroleum jelly on the other side. And they hung the paper plates all around the school. And I told them, you know, put it anywhere, like think, you know, go around the school and kind of like just put it anywhere. And after like a week or so, they take the paper plates and they get to see all the pollutants on the paper plate, all the particulate matter, like it was, and it looked great. I wanted to prove them, like, look how polluted your community is. Like, look how polluted, this is it, this is what you're seeing. And, you know, obviously I want to teach them a little bit to think critically about like, yo, this, one of the things we can do is be more conscientious about, you know, what we put in our bodies, what we buy, right? So there's, you know, there's limitations, but one of the lessons I try to lean that towards was like zero waste kind of like practices, like, you know, reusing what they can. Like at the end, they created like out of mason jars, they created like their own like water containers and stuff like that. And I showed them like, look, if you just like get rid of like your use of plastic, you know, you look how much plastic you're using now, and then look how much plastic you can basically virtually like rid yourself of using just by using like a reusable container, water container. So I myself have been carrying like this 48-ounce container for years right now. But just stuff like that, you know, at least plant that seed. But yeah, I mean, definitely, it's Pomona has been a community that, you know, has been facing a lot of the challenges that, you know, we're systematically, I would say, imposed on us in that community. So I thank you for you know, I'm thankful for the what I would say the ancestors, and I'm thankful for us to be a part of that. Like, we're able to meet each other. Like, even though we met online, we were still like connected in some ways. And I also wanted to like acknowledge everyone here who's coming on to this talk. Like, for whatever reason, why you decided to come here on Friday and join this conversation. Like, I want to pay respects to your kind and loving ancestors who and whatever like agencies kind of brought you here, because this is the time where I feel like a lot of folks are seeking that healing. And you know, I'm more than honored to be around people who are or want to see it and are actually doing it. So
I think it's interesting. When you mentioned the freeways, you know, a lot of the freeways that were built, you know, in order to build those freeways, they displaced a lot of communities of color, and a lot of folks who live near the freeways today tend to be folks of color, and or school, like you said, like, you know, the school was close to the freeway, right? And so a lot of those times, you know, like when school, the people, like children who have to constantly be close to the freeways, you know, they experience like higher rates of asthma and nosebleeds and things like that, you know. And just thinking about that, honestly, I was a kid who would get a lot of nosebleeds, and I don't know, like, it's making me think about that now, you know. That's interesting.
yeah.
Hey, Teresa, I'd like to share. Hi, Fabian invited me, and I am Lisa Diaz. I'm a registered nurse and wanted to be a nurse since I was a teenager. I knew that was a way to serve others. I always felt like I really wish I could heal as much as serve. So as a nurse, I feel I can be a healer. What else I found remarkable was that there's not a lot of Latina nurses. We live in a very predominant, you know, community with many Hispanic people. But if you look at the healthcare providers that serve the community, we don't always find many nurses that look and talk like us. So that was always really important to me. And for that reason, I went on to get more degrees, more advanced degrees, because I knew I could serve a larger population and make more of a difference. It would open more doors, more education, and it has made all the difference. I do work where in the city I live, and whenever I have the opportunity, I do volunteer in this city of Pomona. But I am first generation. I lived in another P town, Pico Rivera. I grew up, and I got into the Cal States, but no money, no FAFSA filled out. I didn't know how to do that. And so I ended up going to community college, then to a Cal State, then to a UC system, UCLA. And I'm listening to you, and so much resonates. Yes, you're right. Kids that live close to a freeway or go to school near a freeway, they do have higher incidence of asthma, but not just asthma. They have other chronic disease. They could develop diabetes more. They can develop cardiac heart problems later on. It is a pollutant, and it is particulate matter that's measured. It gets into their bloodstream, it gets into their bodies. So I am grateful, I'm thankful for my education and my energy, my ability to serve the community and to be here with you all, because I do believe in that good energy, that maybe the love that's been given to the park, Fabian, to Tony Serta, is creating more positive energy, and you all are doing that, sharing your stories right now. So I'm grateful to hear you all.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for the work that you do. I'm a healthcare worker too, so like I know we're trying to coordinate, and a lot of the healthcare workers are, you know, either white or Filipino. So, and if anyone's interested in doing some reading, you can look and why. Like, I think the U.S. only created like for Filipinos to be able to come to the United States was if they were going to take on these jobs. So we can see like how systemically like we witnessed the generations.
Right. And, you know, it's really important to have our own study what's going on. Fabian made a really clear example of how he did interview people that were experiencing, you know, incarceration, and they had no problem talking to him. And I find that the same to be for me when I need to, and I have done some research in healthcare, when I need to talk to people with diabetes, it's a lot easier for them to tell me what's going on and tell me, because I think we understand a little bit more. And so what we need to be making the decisions for our own and also producing that research.
That's right. We gotta tell our stories from our perspectives, right? Or else we'll be othered, you know?
I thank you, Fabian, for the work that you do at the park and connecting the community to the garden. And I think it's providing us an opportunity, the community with an opportunity to learn from the land and from the plants. And there are teachers. So, and seeing things grow, we can see that reflected in ourselves, our ability to grow and also learn patience. I know that's what I learned a lot from the garden, patience, and that not everything grows, but that's okay. Life it keeps striving. I wanted to mention that one of the first schools, well, the first school I taught at was in East LA. It was at Harrison Middle School, and it was a span school, so it goes from kindergarten to 8th grade when I was there, and it borders the 10 freeway, and it was all concrete, no grass, no plants at all. And I taught out in the bungalows that were condemned 5 times. When the cars would pass all day, the building would shake. And I know the students really struggled with a lot in the community. We had a sink in the classroom, and I remember the first time I turned on the water came out brown and yellow and had stuff coming out of the water. And I was like, how is this, you know, sink in this classroom? And I was teaching year round, so we were studying over the summer, and the kids would get thirsty, and there wasn't another drinking fountain around. You had to walk really far to the main building, so the kids would drink this water. I was like, you know, this is you know, horrible. So I would bring like one of those Brita filters to filter the water for the kids, and I talked to, you know, the people about it, the school, and that was my introduction to what I think what you're talking about, like redlining and how funds in the city don't go equally to all schools. Yeah, because I was like, this is horrible, and the kids, they really needed an outlet. There was a lot going on there. There were shootings. I had students who died by, you know, drive-bys, and we didn't have any electives. The only elective we had left, they kept canceling electives. So the only thing we had left before I left was technology, computer, and they were about to take that out too. Yeah, so I really appreciate the work you do, and I know how important it is for the kids to be able to connect with the land and see that people care. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I definitely, with the garden, we were able to plant, actual seeds, but we were also able to plant seeds in the minds of the youth that were right there, right? Especially during COVID times, right? And so, like the children were actually able to learn something, with their hands, and they love going, and they feel, safer at that park. And I have a lot of hope. We still have a lot of work to do, right? But I think to do this work, you need to have hope, right? You need to be optimistic about this stuff, right? Because there's so many things working against us, but there's so many people working together, pushing back as well, right? Like everybody here in this Zoom is doing something different, in different areas. We're pushing back in those areas, right? I have a lot of hope for the parks in Pomona because we were able to really make noise, and people have been making noise for years for these parks, right? Like I don't want to take credit for their work, right? Like people have always been making noise for these parks, right? So that's why I'm very optimistic, right? Because now that we've been able to band together and hit different angles, me as an organizer, like I like hitting different angles. Every single angle I could hit, I'll hit it, right? Like if I need to go, like I'm a parks commissioner, so I'll bring stuff up at the meetings, right? But I'll also empower the community and be like, hey, go speak on that in the meetings, and then we'll put it on the agenda. Hey, let's go to the council meeting and let's make sure that they're over here, that they don't forget about parks, right? When they're putting their budget together and they're giving more than half of their budget to the police, right? Like, let's go over there. Let's remind them that our parks should be a priority. Let's remind them that we need to put more programming in our parks, right? And it's been working out, right? And it's been beautiful. And now because of that, we have the city looking for grants like crazy. Before, they would, like, city staff, they would let grants just expire, and go by them. And other cities, the only reason why they would get them is because Pomona didn't apply. And Pomona really, Pomona does, when we apply for grants, we do a decent job at getting them, right? And so now we're not letting that slip at all. We're saying get those grants. And so now, like, they're looking for grants for a bunch of different parks now, including Tony Serta Park, right? Before, the only grant that we knew about was at one park, right? At Hamilton Park, right? And that park, it has a similar history to Tony Serta Park, a very, very similar history. And Tony Serta Park and Hamilton Park have a very similar history to Chicano Park in San Diego, where people had to come together, make some noise, and make sure that their kids had more than just an empty lot to play in, right? That they actually had a safe place to be at, and they had art that reflected their culture and their community and everything, right? And so that's why I have hope for our city, or for the people of our city, for the youth in our city. We got the city now because of all that noise and because of the demand that we created. Now they're looking into hire a full-time grant writer for our city, right? And like that's a no-brainer for other cities, right? But we got Pomona barely getting it together in that aspect, right? But like I said, I have hope. I'm still on the Parks Commission. I have a lot of plans. I have a lot of ideas. We have to work with anybody who's willing to work with each other. We have to band together as much as we can. Our city, unfortunately, city of Pomona, like, city staff tries to do as least as possible. They'll go out of their way just so that they won't have to go out of their way to do more work, right? But I'm not allowing that at all. I'm calling all of that out. I have to call it out at the parks meetings. We have to call it out at the council meetings. We have to be in the community and educate each other and stay together and work together. And because you cannot challenge institutions as individuals. It's impossible, right? These institutions have been set up, before we were born, right? So they know how to operate, right? They're put together in a way where they're almost unbreakable, right? Unfortunately, right? Like, from the beginning of this country, its history, sexism, racism, classism, homophobia is deeply embedded into all of our constitutions. Those things were embedded in the Declaration of Independence. They're embedded in the Constitution of the United States. You got to look at who wrote those things. It was a bunch of rich white men, right? And so they wrote those documents to benefit their interests, not my interests, not your interests, not no black and brown people, native people's interests at all, right? It was built so that they can make their money, right? And so that they can live their lives, and so that we can work for them, right? And so and all of that is reflected in all of the institutions that came thereafter, right? So like the institution of education, the institution of labor, of housing, right, of healthcare, right, the prison system, prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex, right? Racism and all those isms are embedded into all of those institutions, and like I said, one person can't take them on. So that's why we have to make an organized effort all together, right? And every single, so wherever you're at, like Lisa, if you're in the healthcare system and if you see things that are wrong, you got to band together with people who are like-minded as you. Those that aren't like-minded as you, educate them, band together, stick together, and work together. You know, and that goes for anybody working in any area, in any industry, right? Like, you know, like the only way we can tack this beast is if we band together, y'all. We're those little fish, you know, banding together to form one big fish to take out that other whole big fish, right? That's trying to run our lives, right? So it's like we just gotta keep working. I'm optimistic, and I really appreciate you all for bringing us all together here, y'all. La lucha sigue.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, and that's why I feel, you know, we had these discussions because we need to share this knowledge and experiences so that we can learn from each other, and then, you know, learn the tactics. I mean, honestly, it is like, I know which, I remember that meme of the fish kind of coming together and shaping a big fish, taking over that big fish. But it's, we're all like learning from memes now. But I think about like, even like the Malcolm X, like we're not outnumbered, we're just out organized. And so with that, like Teresa and I are part of a community land trust in Bola Heights. But there's been a lot more community land trusts forming, like El Sereno Community Land Trust. And there's not a lot of those in like in Los Angeles County. There's probably maybe about like 5 or 6, but they're becoming more of a tool, I would say, and more of a strategy for folks to really like that diagram I was sharing earlier. If in reality, if we don't quote unquote own, you know, the communities in the land like around us, because I don't believe in ownership, like we are stewards, but if under this capitalist society and system, you know, capitalism, one of the first tenets is private ownership. So everywhere we navigate in our neighborhoods, it's private ownership. And, you know, if we don't own it, if we don't, then we don't own our community. We don't have self-determination. And I know a lot of folks are talking about like liberation and revolution and all that. But when it comes down to it, it's a lot of this slow work, right? We're fed fast food. We're also fed fast, I don't know, information. But now it's like we got to move slowly. And me and Teresa have been reading and watching this guy named Bayo Akamolafe, and he's Nigerian, and he actually goes to like churches where there's like old white people, and he teaches them about colonization and really addressing their ancestors and stuff. And he teaches it in such like a very peaceful, loving way. But he says in times of urgency, like we need to move slow. And I do think because of colonial society and capitalist society, like our understanding of healing has to come from a new perspective, or perhaps even like ancestral perspective, right? It has to come from something different, like Einstein, or I'm quoting a lot of people here, but Einstein even says like you can't solve the problems with the same mind that created them. So one of the strategies, at least we've been noticing, is community land trust. So in general, it's where a nonprofit, you organize with your community, right? And as a nonprofit, they're able to have land as property, and it's a 99-year lease. So that's about 3-4 generations, you know, guaranteed, like we can have this land. And then every nonprofit provides some good, right? So it could be food, it could be housing, right? So community land trust can have housing, and where the good is low income housing. So, and then you create your through a democratic practices. You create what are the guidelines, what are the principles you want to follow, what are some of the tenets we need to have. So, with that, you have self-determination, and so I think it allows the next generations to at least be secure, right? Because in capitalist society, in order to get more wealthier or be more successful, like you have to own property, you have to own assets for some reason. So if we don't have that, we have no ability to like pass down quote unquote wealth to the next generation. So but I see it more as a tool so that maybe the next generations or the third generations can take on a more radical approach, take on a more disruptive approach, so that the land and everything around us can actually be in continue that healing. So with that, I don't know if there's any other strategies or any other stories too, if anyone wants to jump on to share. But I think maybe if you want talk about a little about strategies or something that we've learned through the past.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think at the very least, so like what the work we're doing now with the work that I'm doing now, right? With the parks and really trying to get their really trying to get the parks up to where they need to be, right? The way that I strategize with this is like, okay, so technically I'm on the inside of the system, right? Because I'm a parks commissioner, I'm a city commissioner, right? It's a public I'm a public officer, I guess, right? That's what they call it. And so like I said, I'm on the inside, right? And so because I'm on the inside, I can do certain things, right? However, I don't have all the power just with the way the city works, right? Like as a commissioner, I have little to no power, right? Unless my council member listens to me and advocates for me. And then at the same time, if my council member doesn't have a majority on the council, then there's very little that you can do, right? The majority of votes on the council, right? City council. So like, let's say there's people on the city council who might not be in favor of certain things that might benefit our parks or something like that, right? So, but there's some people that on the council that are, right? So that's, we have to work with the people who are on the inside of the system. And people say like, oh, we have to become the system to beat the system. Like, I don't think that's entirely true. I think that you can, because eventually the system will swallow you up, and it will change you, and it will mess with your ego, right? And eventually you might even lose your values that you had when you were outside of the system, right? So the trick is to, if you're in the system, you have to work with people that are outside of the system and empower them and show them their power, right? So then that way it's a relationship between people with working within the system and without the system. I don't believe simply being a part of the system you can fix the problem. I believe that if you have a group that's working both angles in the system and out the system, I believe you can create change. And that's how we've been doing this as well. Like I've been able to like mobilize the community, and like there's things that I know that needs to be done. I encourage them to speak during public comment, and then I'm inside of the system, and I could be like, hey, they said that, the community said that this is a necessity, so we need to go with that, right? And so that's kind of like one of my strategies right there, right? Like I tell them like, yo, go speak on this and we can make it happen, right? Because like once people on the decision-making table feel the pressure, they'll fold a lot of the times, right? And then you could be that person on the inside and be like, yeah, you know what? I agree with the community because, the community's right and we need to do what the community's saying, right? And that's just like a person using their position to benefit the community. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what people that are in the system are supposed to be doing. Unfortunately, like I said, a lot of times they forget. A lot of times they get swallowed up by the system. They get swallowed up by the system itself, right? So that's just, that's just one strategy right there. Just making sure that you work. Like if you're working within the system, you better work with the people that are outside of the system as well. Work with the people who are already doing that work, but also work to empower others who might be interested as well and empower them. Yeah. So I don't know. That's just like one thing that I've seen, like making sure you use petitions, right? Like I've started petitions, and then people have said like that's like if you're petitioning yourself, right? But I was like trust me, I know what I'm doing. You know, like I'm gonna, the community is gonna sign on to this, and because this is what they want, and then I can use that to justify, like, hey, nah, like they need to fix those restrooms, or they need to open them up, or they need to put those picnic tables at that park, and some people don't understand that, a lot of people within the system that I like see as allies sometimes, like they struggle, and they're like, oh, like we just can't do that, or, like we don't have the votes. I'm like, dude, and then why don't you go out, educate the community around this issue if they're interested, tell them to go speak, and then you can amplify their voice with your position, but like I don't know, like for some people it's just tough, I guess. But
it's a lot. It's a mixture of things, of capacity. But I think, with Teresa and I, we question a lot of what we do, and we question a lot, like just to think critically. Like it's important that, especially right now, there's a lot of information being shared, and misinformation, and people are calling things like fake news and all that. But having like a good, strong framework, right? This is what we're trying to build to, like a framework where we can understand it. And there's no end all be all solutions. But I think, like we were saying, because I'm working in the system as part of the home, like the social services, right? But I know it's not trying to end homelessness, because we still are following along like institutions and their guidelines, right? So like the typical route in the social services is like you're going to go for MFT or a MSW degree. You're going to become a social worker, or you're going to become a marriage and family therapist, right? And then some folks who get marriage and family therapists, they'll go out and start their own private practice. So it's like, well, you're catering towards capitalism because you're trying to privatize your therapeutic practices. You're commodifying what is a good that we need in our community, right? And so there's a good book called Decolonizing Social Work by Michael Yellowbird, who teaches at Humboldt, I think it's Humboldt University, but he brings in a lot of different perspectives from other countries and everything, right? And for me, and my job, I'm like, there's this term called community social work, I think in Cuba, and it's like, well, I thought all social work was about communities, you know what I mean? But it's really not. Like community social work in Cuba is like where the social worker actually coordinates with city officials and all that. So he coordinates with them and the public to try to merge and come to an agreement. But whereas social work in here, we just follow the status quo. We just follow like, well, if someone's quote unquote crazy, we put them on a psych hold, and put a 5150 on them or something, or we somehow put them into another institution that is going to be following along the command and control model. But what we're talking about right now is like change, and I wanted to share this because now I feel like it's a good opportunity, and we can have a whole discussion on just perspectives of change. And this is not from the book that I'm trying to reference, but it's basically saying there's different types of movements, right? So a lot of folks right now, if we're thinking voting and numbers and working within the system, like going out and vote and all that, and that's going to produce change. Well, that's just one perspective, right? That's a reformative change, right? And it has materialized things that we can see that have done good in our society. But again, we believe in solidarity and diversity of actions, right? So Teresa and I, we guerrilla plant. We've gone to Skid Row, and because we didn't like seeing so much like land being treated like trash, right? It's physically treated like trash, and the community there, like folks are just themselves are being treated like trash because that's concentrated poverty, and we could dive in a whole conversation about Skid Row and its whole history. But we went there and like guerrilla planted, and just carrying this idea of like just direct action, right? Seeing how that worked out rather than going through the whole bureaucratic process. We try to do a whole like garden one time in Altadena, and like we knew that it was probably going to take 5 years until we actually planted something, just because we had to go through the whole bureaucratic process to propose a project, to show our tax, how we're going to be taxed, and all this stuff. So it's like, wow.
We guerrilla planted in Pomona too.
Oh yeah, we guerrilla planted in Pomona.
We wore yellow vests, no, orange vests.
Orange vests.
Cars were just like passing by.
Yeah, so playing the system. You know, it's all symbolic order, right? So I give this example. It's 4 a.m., 3 a.m., or whatever, and you're driving and you hit a red light. And that red light, it's been 15 minutes since the red light changed. So there's no cops, there's nobody around, and you're still waiting to go. So part of that is like what they call hegemony, right? That term hegemony, right? We're all like theory nerds here, but it's like that spontaneous consent, just to consent to like, this is the way and the rules that I have to follow. You know, that's the spontaneous consent. But we have to liberate ourselves, right? Quoting Bob Marley, liberate ourselves from mental slavery. So I want to share this real quick, right? There's reformative changes, which is like going through voting and like city hall and all that. And then there's expressive changes, like perhaps like zero waste, going vegan. And then there's like revolutionary movements, right? Well, you know, it's arguably like, you know, what is a revolutionary movement? We can have a conversation there, but it's just examples, like, and then there's cults, right? There's cults, really like extremely radical, and even that term radical, like what is radical and all that. But there's just different ways in which change can be about. So this is hopefully just providing some framework, right? We can create healing through groups coming together like that, like AA meetings, right? Redemptive changes, which are called like religious movements, like we're seeking meaning, we're seeking a new meaning, right? Our new relationship, because we're called environmentalists, but we're not really like calling ourselves environmentalists. Like we want to address everything. We're like anti-colonial, anti-capitalist. But then like we're not quoting ourselves as like anarchists or anything like that. Again, these are just labels that this society has taught us. But you know, reformative change, like we were talking about, and revolutionary. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it's an important conversation to have, like, and to know what perspective are we carrying with us. Because again, I don't want to reproduce the same systems and the same frame of mind that have brought us here and brought us these problems in the first place. We had conversations with people where we're like, what about a society without like money? And that alone can just make people like, whoa, what do you mean? You know, like that alone might get people to like lash out at you. So with that, you know, it comes back to the individual, kind of like our own experiences, and how do we come together and address, you know, the challenges that we're facing, and then move laterally. So
yeah, I also wanted to respond to what you're saying about working within the system, but connecting outside the system and bringing people in from outside. I do a lot of decolonial work. I teach English, and I try to bring Indigenous voices like Jessa, Tina's daughter, and different Tongva voices into the classroom, their poetry, their stories, their literature, and even we read Bad Indians by Deborah Miranda about the mission system. So the kids are like, what? You know, because they did the 4th grade mission project. So I think being in that position inside, that a lot of us are, like you, Fabian, Lisa, Joe, me, like we do have an opportunity to do certain things, and kind of, I kind of think of the metaphor, you know, like a balloon. Even if you take like a pin, a needle, and you prick a hole, even though the hole is so tiny, that balloon is going to start collapsing, or it's so if we're thinking of this system that we want to kind of break, deconstruct, and create, and the little holes that we puncture into the balloon, it's going to make a difference.
Right, and I do want to add that health is wealth. We really need to focus on our health. There's a lot of behaviors that don't require money. Going for walks in the park and getting that exercise, gardening, being out there, growing the fresh fruit the from the ground, from the earth, is much healthier than a lot of the crap, you know, in drive-through always. But we need to be reminded of that, and a way to really survive in this world is to be healthy, to outlive our enemies. And I also want to point out, yesterday I was so astonished and amazed that some of the Cherokee code talkers received the COVID vaccine early. They wanted to show others in that nation that this is safe. They also want to preserve their language and culture, and those code talkers are some of the last standing members that can practice that tradition. So I just, it's been a really rough year with COVID. Of course, I've seen and done so much, and I had COVID in July, but always health is wealth. So any way we can approach that too, from these intersections we're talking about, we're gonna win that way.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And I love what you said about growing our own foods and how they're much healthier. And I was sharing before the Zoom call, because I just attended this webinar on the Three Sisters planting with this Native organization, and they were talking about how it's so important where we get the seeds, because if we buy just the seeds from the stores, they could be monoculture. So they were actually created to just grow like rolls of corn, and they won't know how to interact with the beans and the squash, which were their like ancestral ways of interacting. So you have to get the seeds that haven't been messed up, like the heirlooms and the native seeds, who still carry that memory of working together as the Three Sisters. And I think that that's such a beautiful metaphor with the Three Sisters planting, and how that those three plants were able to sustain the people throughout the years, and going back to that. And hopefully, I don't know if you want to do a Three Sisters garden, Fabian, at Tony Soto Park. I think that's the story of the Three Sisters too, for the children, would be such a beautiful learning experience.
Ooh, I would love that. Please, please. I've been wanting to reconnect with you all, and you know, because I have a lot of like ideas and a lot of projects, but like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'll be straight up. I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm new to like growing things and you know and plants and all of that stuff. But I know that this is something that that has been calling out to me for a very long time. You know, and I know it's something that can be really used to connect with the community in so many different ways. So yes, please, like, let's connect very, very soon. Maybe next weekend, maybe the weekend after that, something. Let's do it. I would love to.
Yeah, we have seeds.
Right. And you know, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I don't know if anyone knows what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like, what is knowing? So we're all getting all philosophy here. But together, right, we can come to figuring out how to make decisions on what we can do, at least in the present moment. And that's the beautiful part of all of this. Like, you don't need a certification to be some regenerative agriculture planter, or whatever you want to call it. You don't need a certification to be like a mental health advocate, or you don't need a certification to know like good health. But we can learn from each other. We can learn from our experiences, and we can learn from our if we're able to learn from our like ancestral practices of healing, right, and medicine. And I think through the land, that's our first and foremost. Like, it wasn't like the first, I guess, human species. You know, we're coming together and we're like going to Walmart or anything like that, right? We can historically track like that wasn't the case. So, you know, I'm glad that we were able to have these conversations. But does anyone else here on this conversation want to jump in and share something?
No, I wanted to share with you real quick. So me, I'm part of a community garden right here in Southgate. Now it's like a whole work in process thing, you know, like I would have to go through everything just like you guys are saying. Most likely 5 years from now, it'll be happening. I'm actually in right there in the moment as we speak. I do garden and all that, but it's not being done with paperwork and all that, you know. So everything I gather up is pretty much information that helps me on my behalf. And anybody, any connections that I get to, like, help me get everything together, you know, to start getting it to happen. And pretty much, I mean, I just get into every meeting that I can get to see what everybody's doing and then see what I could add to mine or like how we could collab. And then that's why I'm right here too, paying attention to what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Alexis. What's the I guess, what's the project, I guess, like the vision?
The vision, pretty much just the same thing as.
Oh, unmute yourself.
Oh, my bad. So it's pretty much the same thing as Fabian over here. You know, it's like the garden's right there, just forgotten. It's been there for a while. So this was a thing that I think used to get the community together, and it was something that everyone used to do. But it's like it's just forgotten. You know, it's just become nothing but grass and tumbleweeds. And it's like, for me, it's like, you know what, we need to get this thing going to where we have access to it and we could get the community in there, you know, the kids, everybody, just to go in there and have a piece of it themselves, you know, at least like to experience it and enjoy it themselves as well. So it would just be putting it back into use, like since it's already there, before like something like somebody pays attention to it and then decides to try to get rid of it, you know? So while it's there, let's make it useful then, rather than them making it into something else that's now like being used by them. So that would be the vision, like just get everybody to be in there, getting their hands dirty, and then just interacting with each other.
Yeah, and through that, you know, a lot of beautiful things come in fruition. And I feel like when we were trying to do a community garden through like the bureaucratic government route, they wanted us to plan everything, the programming, where the money was going to come from, the design. And so, right, in theory, that helps. In theory, that's a good thing. But like, imagine you go out and you date someone and you're like, well, here's my plan for the future in the next 5 years. You know, like it's in theory okay, but in reality, you know, like Lisa was just commented, like we're learning and we're adapting and having that idea of evolving capacity. We'll probably have a discussion a little bit on what we've learned in like regenerative studies, a little bit of like principles and stuff like that. But evolving capacity is saying like we're not on this deterministic linear route. You know, I work with folks and I help them through their substance abuse and their physical health and mental health recovery plan. But I have to know, like, hey, sometimes I have a client and they might relapse, or they might get injured, or they might, you know, have a mental health challenge and like try to attempt suicide. But my goal is to be there as a support system to help them. And essentially that's what a community is that we have a support system to fall back on when we have challenges. Police, you know, I'm already bringing this abolishment kind of framework, but the police oftentimes make the situation worse. And in my experiences going to like unhoused encampments, you know, not to dive into a whole tangent here, but you know, it just shows like, wow, we don't have the support system that we need. Teresa and I used to throw karaoke and art events with the Showers of Hope, where folks will come in and be able to take showers. But we're like, we need to build like a sense of community, just like you, Fabian, Lisa, and Tina, who are all part of like some organizing that we've been a part of, or that are trying to do. We need to build this sense of community and figure out what does it mean to be a community. And it does mean like making sure that our basic needs are being met, but it also means like being creative and not just being like completely like bureaucratic and all this. Like we're here to hear their voices. We're not here to fight for people. We're here to fight with them. We're not here to just give people plants. We want to teach them how to plant. And then more importantly, we want to teach others how they can teach others how to plant, you know?
Oh, and also learning from the land and learning from the plants. So they're teaching us, a lot of it is that first step. And also, you know, learning what plants will be good to plant here. A lot of it is native. And if you're growing foods, you know, that's good. And also, and to think, you know, what you're learning. Like, I know when I'm planting and I'm gardening, I'm learning constantly, like, okay, you know, seed, plant, soil, water, you know, you're teaching me like every single day, like what the sun, you know, like what they need. So it's a lot of it is listening to what do they need, and every plant is going to need something different. So it's a lot of learning from each other. We have, you know, supporting each other, working together, and having this reciprocal relationship with each other and with the land and with the plants that we're taking care of. Yeah, so it is a lot. It's just a learning process.
You know, when you bring up learning from the plants and learning from each other, you know, learning from our surroundings, you know, it was really interesting. Like, one thing that like blew my mind was that, like, when I started doing the programming right there at the park, and we would meet up like once a month, I started paying attention to the sun, and I started noticing that every single month the sun would go down like at a different time. And I was like, oh my God, like that just blew my mind, dude. Like, like it's something that I don't know, maybe it's obvious to most people, but it wasn't obvious to me, you know, until I was out there at the very least once a month. You know, it was just an interesting observation.
And think about like the Mayan calendar, think about like the Chinese calendar, think about those ancestral calendars, right? They had this perspective of generational changes and of connection with the land and the cosmos and the stars and the sun and everything. And so there are examples like this, how we're connected. And, you know, now, I mean, I probably should be in bed right now, you know, we're out of whack with our circadian rhythms. We're out of whack with our water and nitrogen cycles. We're out of whack with a lot of things. And so healing is possible. And the land does teach us a lot. And we'd be happy to maybe have a time where we could share some of just things we've learned on how to figure out which plants are best to use, how to site survey the land, how to do water testing, whatever we know. And everyone else, we're all coming from a wealth of knowledge. But yeah, that'd be great if we could like support you and Alexis as well, just to jump on and you know, support each other in that way. This is probably what we could do in our capacity, but you know, yeah, we'd be happy.
We're learning too. I've never done a Three Sisters garden, so I'm really excited that yeah, I've seen people do it, and yeah, I know I'll be listening a lot to the corn seeds and the bean seeds and the squash seeds. Yeah.
Just real quick, you know, you mentioned like the ancestral knowledge and everything, you know, and I've really been doing my best to connect with my native roots, right? And so like my family's from Michoacan, and Michoacan, Mexico, and so like the native folks over there would be Purepecha, and so like I've been like doing my best to like learn the language, learn the history, learn the culture as much as I can. And like, you know, you talked about like you know, the ancestral knowledge and how like their calendars, like the Mayan calendar and all that, you know, and so like check this out. Where is it? Hold on, give me a second.
I love show and tell. See, you gotta do stuff.
So I ran into this book, and it's called Miyuqua, and it's Calendario Purepecha. So Purepecha calendar, like my my people's calendar, you know, so I'm doing my best to learn it.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, my calendar is the lunar calendar. So our New Year's is coming up this coming Friday. So we go by the moon, and we've always gone by the moon. And yeah, that's really awesome that you're connecting with your ancestral calendar. It's probably more connected with the earth and the seasons, because this calendar here in the US is the Gregorian calendar, named after a pope who just decided January 1st was going to be the day. And it's not connected to anything, you know. Yeah, that's really great.
I think it's like you mentioned the lunar calendar, and like it has like a very large, like big section on the moon. Like it says fases lunares, so like phases of the moon and stuff like that. So it's like it's interesting like that.
I think a lot of the ancestral calendars were based on the moon cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Even the planting, the moon has an effect when it's waning, getting big, like it helps the leaves grow up. I think that's when, and when it gets smaller, when it's waxing, yeah, it goes, that's when the moon is getting bigger, and that's when it's pulling the leaves up. And then when it's waning, it's getting smaller. That's when the roots get pulled down. So that's a good time to grow like potatoes and carrots. And I think the Farmer's Almanac so was really based on the moon too.
Yeah. Phil, so much like, you know, consistencies within that. Alexis, I know you maybe the connection or something was lost, but we wanted to share that, you know, we're open to having a time where, you know, Fabian, you, and anyone else who is in this chat that's doing work and maybe hasn't had experience with like doing like land restoration. It's land regeneration. We use that because restoration has this idea that time you can go back, but I don't personally like see time as linear. So regeneration is more of like this like continuous like cycle that evolves and all that. But we'll be happy to share some tools and resources and practices that we've learned to help, you know, to support each other in this work, because we're not gatekeepers. Like we want to, this knowledge needs to be, you know, shared so that everyone can become, you know, better relatives and good stewards of the land. But just wanted to share that. So definitely keep us in touch and all that. And we have some homies over there, like in Southgate and stuff. So, you know, maybe we can connect some, like the mycelium, we can connect. But it's about 9:12 right now. Just want to be respectful, I guess, if folks are nodding off or are ready to go to Mimi's. Any lasting thoughts you'd like to share? Oh, Tina?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank you guys for this forum. This was really beautiful. And Fabian, thank you so much for what you've done. And you took us back in memory lane, because I've been going to the powwow, Deloni powwow, since they had it at the restaurant, and then it was in a big old field. There was no park, and we've had them in a parking lot. And so, you know, going to the park, it was a big step up. Even though the bathrooms, like you said, they have shower curtains and not quite, you know, like state of the art, but it's better than being in a field that was full of stickers and stuff like that. So it's a step up. And to hear about the garden, you know, that's awesome. Yeah, I do the soil sponge regeneration too, which is very similar to what Joe and Teresa are doing, just a different process, and it's cooling down the atmosphere. So it's just a win-win, you know. And so for all of us to get our hands in our earth with our Earth Mother and to help the healing come back, because it's all man done, you know, all the pesticides and everything that we've done to our earth to ruin the soil. So it's this new generation that's coming through and helping her to revive again. And by healing the earth, then it in turn heals us and our plant relatives and our animal relatives, because it's all connected, right? So thank you all for what you're doing. And I have to go, but so blessings to you all. And I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Tina. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Tina.
Awesome.
Me too. I'm going to say good night. Be well, everybody. Be safe.
You too. Thank you.
Good night.
Take care.
Take care. Yeah, I'm getting sleepy.
Yeah, sleep is good. We need to sleep.
Yeah.
Sleep is important medicine. Yeah, because everything has a sleep cycle, even plants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Fabian. You know, it's so moving. I was so moved. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you all
What's up?
so
Thanks
much.
for having me.
Thank you, Alexis, for sharing and doing the work that you do. You know, it takes, we're like nodes of a big plant.
Yeah.
And nodes are like sort of where that growth of a plant starts to branch out. So however we can support and continue to grow, we're connected always.
Yeah, we'll stay in touch.
I will. Yes, you have a good one.
You too, man.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jesus and Araceli, for
Yes.
you both joining us too. I hope this was good.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus and Araceli. I hope you stay in touch as well.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you again so much for this. Thank you so much for bringing me on. It really means a lot. Like I want to keep working with you all big time. So I'll reach out to you all about that, and I'll also reach out to some folks here in Pomona who will be interested, who will definitely be interested in working together and everything, y'all. So
Awesome.
thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good
Take
night.
care. Good night.